Ever had a neighbour who just wouldn't listen? One morning, she blocked my driveway. Again. No warning, no apology. I'd asked nicely, many times. That day, I called a tow truck. Was I wrong? Was I right? Let's walk through what happened. And you tell me, what would you have done? Ever had a neighbour who just wouldn't listen? One morning, she blocked my driveway. Again. No warning, no apology. I'd asked nicely, many times. That day, I called a tow truck. Was I wrong? Was I right? Let's walk through what happened. And you tell me, what would you have done? It all started a few months ago, right after my husband and I moved into our new home. We were excited, quiet suburb, friendly neighbours, a double driveway for our 2 cars. You know, the kind of setup that just works. Then there was Linda. Linda lives next door. She's in her late 50s, retired, and has this sort of casual air about her, always watering her plants, chatting with passers-by, and waving like nothing's ever wrong. At first, we got along fine, but then she started parking in our driveway. At first, it was just for a few minutes. I figured, okay, maybe she had guests. Maybe her driveway was full. I let it go. But then it happened again, and again, and again, full on, blocking our way, parked in like she owned the place kind of behaviour. I tried to be nice. I really did. I talked to her, face to face, politely asked her to stop parking in our driveway, explained that we needed both spaces, and that it wasn't just inconvenient, it was inconsiderate. She smiled, nodded, said she didn't realise, and promised to stop. For about a week, she did. Then she was right back at it. Now maybe this sounds petty to some people. It's just a driveway, right? But here's the thing. When someone starts ignoring clear boundaries repeatedly, that's no longer a misunderstanding. That's a choice. A choice to dismiss your words. A choice to assume their needs matter more than yours. And it wasn't like she had nowhere else to park. She has a perfectly functional driveway of her own. She just didn't feel like using it sometimes. Too far from the door, too hot outside, who knows? I didn't want to turn this into a feud. Nobody wants tension with their neighbour. But where do you draw the line? At what point does being polite turn into being walked on? Because here's the truth. I started to feel disrespected. Not just annoyed. Disrespected. Like my voice didn't count. Like my home didn't matter. Like I had to rearrange my life around someone who couldn't be bothered to walk a few extra steps. So tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Do you let it slide? Keep asking nicely and hope for the best? Or do you stand your ground even if it makes things uncomfortable? Up next, I'll tell you what happened the morning everything boiled over, the day I finally called the tow truck. But first, I want to hear from you. When someone keeps crossing the line and words don't work, what's the next step? So, what do you do when someone keeps crossing the line and words no longer work? That morning, I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted to make it to my appointment on time. It was early, about 7:30 a.m. I had a checkup I couldn't reschedule. My husband had already left for work, and I came downstairs, coffee in hand, ready to head out. I opened the garage, pulled my bag over my shoulder, and froze. There it was, Linda's car, again, parked smack in the middle of my driveway. I just stared at it for a moment, blinking like maybe I was imagining it, like maybe it wasn't real. But no, it was very real, very much in the way, and my car, boxed in, completely useless. So, I did what any reasonable person would do. I walked over to her door and knocked. Nothing. I knocked again. Still nothing. Waited. 5, 10, 15 minutes. Nothing. Then I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. No explanation, no apology, not even a note, just silence. That's when something in me snapped. Not in an angry, screaming sort of way, but in that quiet, fed up, I'm done being nice kind of way. I called a towing company. Now, was it extreme? Maybe. But at that moment, I felt like I didn't have any other option. I'd done the patient thing. I'd used my words, more than once. And frankly, I was tired of feeling powerless in my own driveway. The tow truck arrived faster than I expected. They started hooking up her car, and wouldn't you know it, that's when Linda suddenly appeared. She came storming out of her front door, bathrobe flapping, yelling like I'd just set her house on fire. "You didn't have to do this. You could have waited. You're being petty." I stayed calm. I reminded her, again, that this wasn't the first time, or the second, or even the fifth. I told her I was late. I had no other choice. But she wasn't listening, not really. Her voice got louder, more dramatic, like I was the villain in some neighborhood soap opera. And look, I get it. Getting your car towed is frustrating, embarrassing even, but it didn't have to come to this. If she had respected our space in the first place, none of this would have happened. She paid the fee, eventually, but I could tell this wasn't over for her, not by a long shot. And as I pulled out of my driveway, finally on my way, I remember thinking, did I just make things worse? Or did I finally take control of a situation that had gone too far? So here's my question for you, listening out there. When someone puts you in that kind of spot, do you keep playing nice? Next up, I'll tell you what happened after the car was towed, the aftermath, the gossip, and the unexpected backlash. But for now, what would you have done? So, you finally stand your ground, you take action, and for a brief moment, it feels like victory. But what happens after you draw that line? I'll tell you, things get complicated. After Linda's car was towed, I thought, naively, that maybe this would be the end of it. That maybe, finally, she'd stop parking in our driveway. I didn't expect an apology, but I figured the message had been received loud and clear. Instead, I woke up the next morning to find that Linda had beaten me to the court of public opinion. It started small. A neighbor across the street gave me a weird look while watering her flowers. Another one waved, but it felt different, more hesitant, like they weren't sure which version of the story to believe. And sure enough, word started getting back to me. Linda was telling people that I was vindictive, hostile, even unstable, that I had her car towed without warning, without even knocking, just because I don't like her. Which, if you've been following this story, is not how it happened. But here's the thing. People love a good drama, and it's always easier to sympathize with the one who lost something, in this case, her car for a few hours, than with the one who made the big move. And while I could have just ignored the gossip, it didn't stop there. Even my own husband, who had watched this whole situation unfold over months, wasn't exactly thrilled. "I get why you did it," he said, "but couldn't you have handled it differently? You know how people talk around here." And just like that, the tension wasn't just between me and Linda anymore. It was in my own home. Then came the cherry on top. My mother-in-law was visiting that day. And over lunch, as we were eating in near silence, she set down her fork and said, with that calm, judgmental tone only mothers-in-law seem to master, "Some people just can't manage conflict like adults." She didn't name names. She didn't have to. I just sat there, smiling politely, chewing my salad like it was made of cardboard. Here's what nobody tells you. Standing up for yourself is rarely clean or simple. Sometimes, doing what feels right can still come with consequences you didn't expect. Social fallout, family tension, a whole new kind of stress. And I started asking myself, did I really make my life easier? Or did I just trade one kind of frustration for another? But then again, what's the alternative? Let someone walk all over you just to keep the peace. So here's my question for you. Is there such a thing as standing your ground the right way, or does it always come at a cost? In the next part, I'll talk about how things have been since that day, where I stand with Linda now, and what I've learned from the whole mess. But before we get there, have you ever done the right thing and ended up the bad guy anyway? So here's a question. What happens after you take a stand, but the situation doesn't really resolve, just shifts? It's been a few weeks since the towing incident, and to be honest, things haven't exactly gone back to normal. At least not in the way I hoped. Linda doesn't park in our driveway anymore. So in that sense, sure, mission accomplished. But now, instead of confrontation, I get cold shoulders, dirty looks, that kind of heavy silence you can feel when someone's pretending you're invisible, but making sure you know it. She won't speak to me, won't wave, and when we cross paths, whether at the mailbox or pulling into our homes at the same time, she makes a point to scowl or sigh just loud enough to make a statement. Some days I try to ignore it. Other days I question everything. Did I overreact? Could I have handled it better? Was towing the car really worth all this weird energy? It's like a pebble in your shoe, not painful, but annoying, constant. What really gets me is that this drama has taken something from me that I didn't expect. My comfort in my own neighborhood. I used to step outside and feel peaceful. I loved our street, the quiet, the routine of it all. But now, I find myself peeking out the window before going to the mailbox, wondering if I'm about to get the look again. And you know what's funny? Nobody talks about that part of boundary setting. The awkward aftermath, the price of sticking up for yourself. We love stories about people who draw the line and feel empowered, but we skip the parts where you're left wondering if people are whispering behind your back at the block party, or where even your spouse seems more concerned with keeping the peace than backing you up. My husband and I have talked about it more than once. He says he gets it, but he also says things like, maybe just let her cool off, or you don't have to be right out loud all the time. And that stings a little, because to me this was never about being right. It was about being heard, being respected in my own home, in my own space. I'm not proud of the tension. I don't like feeling at odds with my neighbor, but I also can't ignore what would have happened if I'd just let it go, again. Because the truth is, kindness without boundaries isn't kindness, it's permission. So I'm learning to live with the silence, the awkwardness, even the gossip. Because what I gained, peace in my driveway, ownership of my space, might just be worth more than a few fake smiles and shallow waves. Still, I wonder, when it comes to conflict, is it better to protect the peace on the outside or protect your peace within? Let that one sit with you. Next, I'll share what I've learned from all this and what I'd do differently, if anything, knowing what I know now. But for you listening, what price would you pay for peace? So let me ask you this. If you had the chance to go back and do something... It's been long enough now, since the whole driveway drama with Linda, that the anger has cooled. The tension's still there, but it's faded into the background. We don't talk, we don't wave, and we definitely don't park in each other's spaces anymore. And honestly, that's okay. Looking back, there are things I wish I'd done differently. Not because I regret towing her car, but because I wish it hadn't had to go that far. I wish I'd written a formal note the first time. I wish I'd documented the pattern sooner. I even wish I'd had a calm, sit-down conversation before I reached my breaking point. But I also know this. Sometimes you can do all the right things and still end up being the bad guy in someone else's version of the story. What this experience really taught me is that boundary setting is messy. It's not something you do once, it's something you live through. And yes, it comes with risks. Awkward silences, judgy neighbors, even family tension. But the reward is peace. Not the peace that comes from avoiding conflict, but the peace that comes from knowing you stood up for yourself, even when it was hard. Because here's the truth I've come to accept. You don't owe anyone comfort at the cost of your dignity. You don't have to keep explaining yourself when someone repeatedly crosses a line. And most of all, you don't have to be liked by everyone, especially if it means betraying your own needs. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, wow, I've had a Linda in my life, or maybe you've been called petty for standing your ground, then you know how complicated this stuff can get. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to take action that made people uncomfortable, even though you knew it was the right thing? Or maybe you've got a neighbor story of your own, good, bad, or totally unhinged. Head over to the comments and drop your experience. No judgment. This is a space for real stories, real boundaries, and yes, real messiness. And if you made it this far, thank you. These aren't just neighborhood stories, they're human stories. And maybe, just maybe, talking about them helps all of us handle the next one a little better. So hit that like button if this resonated with you. Leave a comment if you've got a story to share. And if you know someone who's battling a boundary war of their own, send this their way. Let's make space for real talk, real support, and real growth. Because the drama, that's just the surface. What matters is how we show up in it and what we learn from it. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, your driveway, your rules.